Why do people instantly doubt victims, but never doubt power? Why do entire societies look away from crimes that are openly visible? Today, we're going to solve a disturbing psychological mystery. Why elite criminals don't hide and yet remain unseen. The comfort of blindness. Society does not fail to see elite crimes. It refuses to see them. This refusal is not accidental, nor is it the result of ignorance. It is a psychological strategy quietly adopted, deeply rooted, and widely shared. The human mind, when confronted with truths that threaten its sense of order, does not move toward clarity. It retreats into blindness. This blindness is not empty. It is comforting, warm, and protective. It allows people to continue living without confronting the unbearable weight of reality. To acknowledge elite crimes is to accept that the world is not governed by merit, fairness, or moral progress. It is to recognize that power often stands above consequence, that justice bends, and that innocence is not protected equally. This recognition destabilizes the individual's internal structure. It creates anxiety, helplessness, and a sense of exposure. The mind, designed more for survival than truth, reacts defensively. It does not ask, "Is this true?" It asks, "Can I live with this being true?" Blindness becomes the answer. People convince themselves that such crimes are exaggerated, misunderstood, or irrelevant to their own lives. They dismiss evidence not because it is weak, but because it is dangerous. Dangerous to peace of mind, dangerous to routine, dangerous to the fragile belief that effort leads to safety and obedience lead to protection. The truth threatens to reveal that none of these guarantees exist. The average person survives by assuming the world is fundamentally predictable, that rules apply, that those in charge are, if not good, at least restrained. Elite crimes shatter this assumption. They expose a reality where rules are flexible, morality is negotiable, and suffering is often invisible if it serves power. Faced with this, the mind chooses denial over despair. This is why outrage is selective. Crime committed by ordinary individuals provoke immediate moral clarity. Crime committed by the powerful provoke hesitation, debate, and doubt. The difference is not evidence, but psychological cost. Condemning the powerless changes nothing in one's worldview. Condemning the elite forces a reckoning with vulnerability. Blindness is not passive. It is actively maintained. People avoid information, mock whistleblowers, distrust victims, and label uncomfortable facts as conspiracies. These behaviors are not signs of stupidity. They are signs of fear. Fear of losing faith in institutions. Fear of realizing that safety is conditional. Fear of understanding that one's own life is more fragile than believed. The mind prefers a false sense of security over a true sense of danger. There is also a deeper, darker layer to this blindness. Many people unconsciously identify with power, not because they possess it, but because they hope to one day benefit from it. Condemning elite crimes feels like condemning a future version of themselves, or at least a dream they cling to. Blindness preserves aspiration. It allows individuals to believe that proximity to power equals protection rather than exploitation. This creates a subtle moral trade. People exchange truth for hope. Not hope of justice, but hope of personal survival within an unjust system. They tell themselves that the system must work, because if it doesn't, then their sacrifices have been made in vain. Obedience, patience, and conformity only feel meaningful if the structure they serve is legitimate. When legitimacy collapses, so does meaning. Blindness, then, becomes an act of emotional self-preservation. It keeps despair at bay. It prevents the paralysis that comes from recognizing one's own powerlessness. It allows people to wake up, go to work, and plan for the future without the constant awareness that the rules they follow may not apply to those above them. Society does not train people to seek truth. It trains them to endure life. And endurance requires illusions. The illusion that someone is in control. The illusion that evil is rare and punished. The illusion that progress is inevitable. Elite crimes threaten all three. So the mind does what it has always done in the face of unbearable reality. It closes its eyes, not out of malice, but out of exhaustion. It chooses silence over confrontation, comfort over courage, blindness over clarity, because seeing too much in a world where one feels powerless is not enlightenment, it is torment. Power as moral invisibility. Power does not merely influence laws or institutions, it reshapes perception itself. When power reaches a certain height, it stops being seen as force and begins to appear as inevitability. This transformation is crucial to understanding why elite crimes dissolve in the public consciousness. The powerful are not simply protected by systems, they are shielded by psychology. Their actions pass through a mental filter that softens, distorts, or erases moral judgment before it can fully form. Society unconsciously associates power with competence, and competence with legitimacy. Wealth, status, and influence create an aura that suggests superiority or judgment. The mind assumes that those who rise to the top must possess deeper knowledge, greater intelligence, or exceptional foresight. This assumption is rarely questioned. It is accepted because questioning it threatens a belief that the world rewards merit. Once this belief takes root, the actions of the powerful are interpreted through a different moral lens. When an ordinary person commits a crime, intent is assumed. When a powerful person commits the same act, intent is debated. Their behavior is framed as strategic, complex, or misunderstood. The crime is no longer seen as a moral violation, but as a technical issue requiring experts' committees and endless analysis. Moral clarity disappears, replaced by abstraction. Guilt becomes invisible not because it is absent, but because it is buried under layers of explanation. Power transforms individuals into symbols. They are no longer perceived as people capable of cruelty, but as representations of success, stability, or national identity. Attacking them feels like attacking the system itself. This psychological shift discourages accountability. The mind resists assigning blame because blame implies vulnerability in the structures that provide order. To accept that those at the top are capable of open wrongdoing is to accept that the foundation is rotten. Language plays a critical role in this invisibility. Crimes committed by the elite are rarely named directly. They are softened into terms like misconduct, oversight, irregularities, or failures. These words drain emotional weight from actions that would otherwise provoke outrage. The moral dimension is stripped away, leaving behind a sterile narrative that feels distant and unthreatening. By the time the public encounters the story, the crime has already been neutralized. There is also a quiet intimidation embedded in power. Even without direct threats, influence generates fear. People sense that challenging the powerful carries consequences, whether social, economic, or psychological. This fear does not need to be conscious to be effective. It manifests as hesitation, doubt, and a desire to wait for someone else to speak first. Silence spreads not because everyone agrees, but because no one wants to stand alone. Power also benefits from complexity. Elite crimes are often entangled with legal jargon, financial systems, and bureaucratic processes that feel inaccessible. This complexity creates distance. The average person feels unqualified to judge, and this perceived lack of authority becomes an excuse for inaction. Moral responsibility is outsourced to institutions that may be compromised, slow, or unwilling to act. In this way, power hides behind its own machinery. The most dangerous aspect of moral invisibility is that it feels reasonable. It presents itself as caution, fairness, and intellectual restraint. People tell themselves they are being balanced, objective, and rational. In truth, they are surrendering moral instinct in exchange for psychological comfort. Power thrives in this environment, not because it silences everyone, but because it convinces them that silence is a mature response. Over time, repeated exposure to unpunished elite crimes normalizes injustice. The public becomes desensitized. What once shocked now barely registers. This erosion of moral sensitivity does not happen suddenly. It unfolds gradually, like a slow dimming of light. Eventually, the absence of outrage feels natural. The crime exists, but it has no emotional weight. It floats through public discourse like a rumor, never landing long enough to demand action. Power does not need to erase evidence to become invisible. It only needs to reshape how that evidence is perceived. By the time facts reach the collective mind, they are being stripped of urgency, responsibility, and moral clarity. What remains is a hollow awareness, sufficient to claim knowledge, but insufficient to provoke resistance, allowing power to move freely, untouched by the very rules it claims to uphold. Fear disguised as rationality. Society prides itself on reason. It claims that judgment must be slow, balanced, and informed. When elite crimes surface, the immediate response is rarely denial. It is postponement. People insist on waiting, analyzing, cross-checking, and contextualizing. On the surface, this appears mature and intellectual. Beneath it lies a far more primitive force. Fear. Not fear of being wrong, but fear of what being right would demand. If elite crimes are acknowledged as real and systemic, then moral responsibility cannot remain abstract. It would require confrontation, disruption, and risk. Most individuals sense, even if vaguely, that such confrontation would place them in conflict with forces far stronger than themselves. The mind, designed to avoid danger, responds by wrapping fear in the language of reason. Rationality becomes a disguise, allowing retreat without admitting cowardice. This fear is not always conscious. It rarely announces itself as terror. Instead, it manifests as skepticism. Victims are scrutinized more intensely than perpetrators. Motives are questioned. Timelines are dissected. Every inconsistency becomes a reason to pause. The demand for perfect evidence becomes endless because perfection is impossible. What appears to be intellectual rigor is often emotional avoidance. Fear also explains why society demands legal confirmation before moral judgment. People confuse legality with morality because legality feels safer. Courts, documents, and procedures create distance between the individual and the ethical weight of decision. By deferring judgment to institutions, the individual avoids the discomfort of forming an independent moral stance. This deference is framed as respect for due process, but its psychological function is insulation. There is an unspoken calculation happening in the background. What will it cost to believe this? What will it cost to speak about it? What will it cost to care? The mind answers these questions quietly and then constructs rational explanations to justify withdrawal. It says the issue is too complex, too political, too uncertain, or too divisive. These explanations allow fear to operate without being acknowledged. Social fear plays a crucial role. Humans are deeply sensitive to belonging. Challenging elite power risks social isolation, ridicule, or professional harm. The fear of being labeled irrational, extreme, or naive is enough to silence many. Rationality becomes a shield. By presenting silence as thoughtfulness, people protect their social standing while appearing intellectually superior. Fear also distorts time perception. People believe that waiting will somehow make the truth clearer or the consequences lighter. In reality, waiting often serves power. Delays exhaust public attention, blur memory, and normalize injustice. The longer judgment is postponed, the less urgent it feels. Fear prefers delay because delay feels non-committal. It avoids immediate danger while preserving the illusion of future action. Another dimension of this disguised fear is a fear of meaninglessness. If elite crimes are widespread and unpunished, then the moral narratives taught since childhood collapse. Hard work, obedience, and honesty lose their promised rewards. Many people would rather believe that justice is slow than accept that it is selective. Rational explanations preserve this belief. They allow people to maintain faith in the system while acknowledging flaws in a controlled, manageable way. Even outrage, when it does appear, is often carefully limited. It is expressed in abstract terms, directed at vague systems rather than specific individuals. This form of outrage feels safe because it does not threaten power directly. It creates a sensation of resistance without the risk. Fear allows this performance because it satisfies emotional tension without demanding real sacrifice. Rationality, in this context, is not the enemy. The misuse of rationality is. When reason serves truth, it clarifies. When it serves fear, it obscures. Society's response to elite crimes reveals which function is at work. The endless calls for neutrality, balance, and patience are less about fairness and more about self-protection. Fear does not silence people by force. It persuades them that silence is the most reasonable option. It teaches them to confuse caution with wisdom and inaction with intelligence. In doing so, fear ensures that elite crimes remain suspended in debate rather than confronted in reality, protected not by secrecy, but by the collective decision to remain rational at all costs. The collective lie. Society does not survive on truth alone. It survives on shared narratives that make life tolerable. Among these narratives is a belief that injustice is an exception rather than a foundation. This belief is not maintained by ignorance, but by a silent agreement to preserve it. The collective lie is not imposed from above. It is upheld from below, sustained by millions of small decisions to remain quiet, doubtful, or distracted. At the heart of this lie is a fear of collapse. If elite crimes were fully acknowledged, not as isolated scandals but as patterns, the moral architecture of society would fracture. Trust in institutions would erode. Authority would lose its legitimacy. The rules that govern behavior would feel arbitrary rather than binding. Most people sense this, even if only faintly, and they instinctively move to protect the structure that gives their lives coherence. The collective lie operates through normalization. Repetition dulls impact. Each new revelation is framed as another unfortunate incident, another complex case, another issue to be handled quietly. Over time, the abnormal becomes familiar. Outrage fatigue sets in. People do not stop caring because they approve. They stop caring because caring becomes exhausting. The lie offers relief. It allows people to function without constantly confronting moral contradiction. This lie is reinforced through social signaling. Silence becomes a form of conformity. When others do not speak, speaking feels inappropriate. The absence of reaction is interpreted as consensus. Individuals take cues from their environment, assuming that if something were truly unacceptable, someone else would have acted. This diffusion of responsibility spreads quickly, creating a vacuum where accountability should exist. The collective lie also protects identity. Many people define themselves through the systems they belong to: nation, profession, class, ideology. To acknowledge elite crimes within these systems feels like a personal attack. It threatens self-image. Defensiveness replaces reflection. The lie becomes a way to protect not just institutions, but the self. By minimizing wrongdoing, individuals avoid confronting their own complicity, however indirect. There is comfort in believing that corruption is limited, controlled, and temporary. This belief allows people to maintain hope without demanding change. The collective lie tells them that the system is flawed but fixable, that justice will eventually prevail, that patience is virtuous. These beliefs soothe anxiety. They transform passivity into moral restraint. In reality, they often function as permission to do nothing. The most effective aspect of the collective lie is that it feels voluntary. No one is forced to accept it. People adopt it because it aligns with their desire for stability. It requires less emotional energy than resistance. It demands no sacrifice. It allows daily life to continue uninterrupted. In this sense, the lie is efficient. It preserves order at the cost of integrity. Those who challenge the collective lie are often treated as threats rather than truth-tellers. They are labeled extreme, bitter, or disruptive. This reaction serves as a warning to others. It teaches that exposing uncomfortable truths carries social penalties. The lie, therefore, polices itself. It does not need enforcement. It relies on fear of exclusion and ridicule. Over time, the collective lie reshapes moral intuition. People begin to feel that outrage is naive and skepticism is mature. Indifference is mistaken for wisdom. This inversion of values does not occur suddenly. It develops slowly through repeated compromises. Each compromise feels small, reasonable, and harmless. Together, they form a culture where elite crimes are acknowledged in words but denied in consequence. The collective lie is not maintained by villains alone. It is maintained by ordinary people choosing emotional safety over moral clarity. It is sustained by the belief that confronting power is futile, dangerous, or unnecessary. In preserving the lie, society preserves itself, but in a diminished form, one that functions efficiently while quietly abandoning its claim to justice.